Okay, if you can hear me, someone give me a wave, Jonathan. I see you've chimed into the chat there. If you can hear me, let me know. Had an issue with the sound there, and Zoom had taken over my audio input for some reason. So hopefully that's cleared up now.
Cool. So I've just switched back to my headset mic as well, so hopefully this continues to record. But anyway, that looks to be playing, so that's good. So basically, I've not done this in a while, and following on from the video that I did with Jonathan yesterday, which you can check over on YouTube, um, this video here, we kind of explained the theme that we started to build for the Gatsby theme contest. So we started to build this theme that's essentially an e-commerce store out of the box that you can just install the Gatsby plugin as a theme and add your configuration, such as your client ID with Molten, and you get an e-commerce store out of the box where you can um, add things to a cart and check out. So what we've got now, like we discussed yesterday, if you go view this video here, we kind of dive into it a bit in more detail. But what we've got so far is this idea of a catalog. Now, earlier today, I started to create a pull request for a cart context. And I'm using the create context from the new version of React and some of the hooks for use reducer and use effect. So essentially, I'm just going to go over what's in this file because I think it's quite a very basic setup. There's a lot going on in here. Really, just because there's a lot of functionality that we're trying to abstract in terms of the commerce stuff. So there's one thing that I want to update in here. I'm not going to go through kind of rebuilding this. I was going to go through line by line, but let's just kind of see what's going on and how it kind of connects with Gatsby as the theme, and then how we can kind of hook into that. So what we got so far for the current theme is we have the ability to kind of list products and go to a product page. But it would be great if we had a button in here that said add to cart and it added to the cart context. So while we won't do that in this video, that'll be for the next video. This video, I kind of just want to go over the context and how we'd actually do that. So what I want to be able to do is go to a page / cart, and it would show all of the items in the cart. But we just kind of want to set up the base for that. So I'm just going to kind of go through here and see how we can do that. So this is the repo, and essentially what we've got is a pull request, which is this one here. Still in draft. There's still a few things to add, but essentially it adds a few things for the card context. So let's just go through that and see what that looks like. So we've got the theme, and that's the Gatsby theme, and we obviously install that theme from well, it's from this package essentially. We're using Yarn workspaces, so this kind of will look up the package in the current workspace and use that, which is cool. And then obviously we can publish this to npm registry, which it already exists today, and then we can use that and install it like we would do normally. So yeah, let's have a look at the actual package. So where we actually define this package and create this theme. Is inside of this packages folder, and then we kind of set some things up. So for the context, obviously the Gatsby server side render and file, we kind of wrap our root element with this cart provider, and this cart provider comes from some Gatsby context which I had open before. So let's just take a look at that and see what's in there. So a few things we're doing is obviously we're importing stuff from React, and we're importing the Molten client library. And this Molten client library is just a very thin sort of SDK to make network requests to Molten. And Molten is if you've not heard of it, is an e-commerce API. It abstracts quite a lot of the business logic and really leaves you to implement whatever kind of commerce experience you want. So in our case, with this Gatsby theme, we want to load some products statically, and the Gatsby source plugin does that. And we can go into that in another video. But in this, we're actually importing an SDK we can use on the client side. So once React's rehydrated and we have React on the page, we want to be able to make network requests such as posting to the API. And this SDK kind of allows us to do that and handles authentication for us. I'm including this other thing here, such as a storage adapter. All this does is kind of stores in local storage our current access token, and we provide that to the SDK so it knows where to look and what the key is called for that token. Then we've got a hook, which I'll go into a bit later on as we get to that. So if you're familiar with Redux, one of the patterns that I really liked in Redux was the ability, was this Dux approach, and that was the ability to define all of the action types and all the constants for those, the reducers and the actions and everything else inside of one file. And that made it really easy. As long as you split everything out, and it was all composable, then it made it really easy to kind of follow along and see what sort of each thing was doing. So here we have two concepts. One is set cart and one is reset cart. Very basic for now. We kind of invoke set cart for all of our actions right now. It's just setting the state for the cart and then resetting the cart, as you can imagine, just kind of resets the state back to the initial state. Then I'm kind of just opening up my cart context variable here, and then I'm going to kind of destructure from this create context, which you got from React, just kind of creating this new context object and or instance, and I'm grabbing the provider and consumer. And if you've not used the create context before from React, then I highly suggest you go check out their docs. They've got a really good walkthrough on how you can use this. It's a little bit different to how context worked before in React, but it also brings a lot of the things where people are reaching out to use Redux. You can kind of just rely on React to do most of the logic today. So next, we kind of set some initial states. So some of the things in our cart that we want is we want to know like how many items are in the cart, and then set an array of all of the items. And then there's some other specific things which are specific to Molten in this case. We want to kind of collect the cart items and any promotional items and any tax items. And one of the things that Molten does is when it returns data from the carts API, it kind of just sends you an array of all of the items in your cart. And these items could be actual products in the cart. They could be tax items in the cart. They could be any promotional items in the cart. They all kind of get added as an item. So I kind of need to do some kind of checks to see what item is it that I'm going through and update the state accordingly when I run the set cart action. Then we've got a plain old reducer here. It's really good. The reducer, you kind of provide some state. You provide an action, which typically will have a payload. It's kind of a standard that's set out, and that payload will contain information to kind of pass into the action. And the type is set cart. We are grabbing the data and from the action payload and meta, and this is information that comes from Molten. And then, like I said, we kind of want to grab the cart items and all of the items that come back from Molten. We want to filter them and make sure that they're a cart item. Then we do the same for promotional items. We'll check to see if it's a promotion item, and then we do the same for a tax item. And we're just filtering out the results to get these. And then again, we want to have a count. So the thing here is actual cart items have a quantity, and we kind of want to just sum up the quantity of all the items in the cart. So there could be 2 items in the cart. One of the items could have a quantity of 2. One of them could have a quantity of 1. So then the count here would be 3, and that's kind of what we want to achieve by running this reducer function here. So the reducer kind of takes in the sum, which I'm calling the sum here because we're returning an integer, and the sum here is just going to be a collection of the quantity plus the previous sum as well. So in this case, we're kind of just destructuring from each cart item the type and the quantity, and we're checking to see the types of cart item because we don't want to sum up any promotional items or any tax items. Then we kind of just sum up the sum and quantity together and return it, and the default is 0 if there's nothing. Subtotal, we kind of want to provide some subtotal to Molten and update the state with that. That's not defined up here. We could kind of do subtotal and put that there as well. Just so it has some initial value. I'm just gonna have it null right now. That could be something else. That could be the subtitle is a formatted amount. So in my case, it could be the subtotal, the initial subtotal. But I'm just going to leave this up to Molten to to define when the network request comes back. And so yeah, then that just returns that kind of state, and then reset state just returns this initial state, and because it's a reducer, that kind of gets that updates the state. So yeah, that's kind of the reducer. Don't want to kind of go into that too much right now. Over the next few days, we will kind of expand on this and kind of go through. Then we have the meat of it really here. What we've got is the cart provider. So the cart provider is just something I'm giving a name for, and the cart provider here takes in a few things, such as the client ID, any children, and then it kind of collects all the props. So where these props are provided from, I should say, is the Gatsby browser and Gatsby SSR files. So the Gatsby browser, obviously, it imports the cart provider, and then it wraps our root element in the cart provider. And as you see here, we're passing along the client ID. And the client ID is set to us in the environment variable, Gatsby Molten client ID. And then this client ID here is passed obviously here. So we're just structuring that, and then we're going to pass that along to instantiate a new Molten client. We pass in the client ID, we pass in the application type here. This is just so we at Molten know who specifically is using the SDK here, and it makes good use for us to kind of track who's using this theme. And then the storage, I'm setting a custom storage to store all of the tokens in local storage, so it kind of persists that token as well. So every time you make a network request, it's not having to re-authenticate, return and update the token, and then send the request again. It can just say, have I got this token? Yes, I have. Then it will send that token along. Then we need to set kind of initial cart ID. So we have this little helper imported from Molten called create cart identifier, and that just creates a new ID for the cart. Cool. I'm just checking out the comments as well. So what other context is there? Yeah, thanks for giving us the context on the context and go over the context. Okay, cool. So yeah, context quite cool. And it's actually very simple if you kind of want to abstract state and keep it elsewhere and kind of keep that persisted across different pages. That's really helpful. So I'm just I've got two screens open right now. That's pretty much how that works. So I'm setting this up in the browser and in Gatsby SSR. I'm setting up the cart provider. It's the same thing right now. We don't have an overly complex setup, but for the moment, we are just passing that along. And then the children here is just everything we pass in here. And that kind of just passes along to the next context provider, which in this case is layout provider. And then using the use reducer that we got from React, we are setting the reducer as the first argument that we defined above, and then we're setting that initial state for that as well. And because it's a hook, we get the state, and we can destructure the dispatch as the kind of response here from use reducer. And the same below, this cart ID and set cart ID. We are actually using a hook called local storage, use local storage. If I check out this hook, this is just something I found. I think it was on one of the hook websites where it's kind of a collection of hooks. I've kind of used this for a while now. But essentially all this is doing is return a function that takes in a key and initial value, and then it returns our kind of getter and setter for the local storage. So it's not really important what's going on here. The important thing just to know here is it's just a nice kind of API almost to talk to local storage and kind of set some defaults. And because we're in Gatsby as well, this is in a try-catch block and it works real well. So in the Gatsby SSR file, when the pages are being created for the server and dynamically statically created, there isn't such thing as a window. So this is just going to error and it's just going to return the initial value. And then the case here is it's just going to be empty or a predefined cart ID. So that's kind of how it works. That would work with Gatsby. And then as we go down, we've got a simple Boolean here, which is just checking the count and seeing that the count is set to 0. And then if it is, it just sets into that. And that's quite good to pass to our application so we know when the cart is empty. This use effect is a nice React hook. And on when the component mounts, I would say, it will get the cart so they can set the cart immediately. And then it would set the cart ID if it doesn't already exist. So if there's no cart ID, one will be provided to us because there is an initial cart ID. And then that will just kind of go ahead and create the cart. And then basically if the cart ID changes, it will go ahead and run these again. That's all that this part here is doing. Then we've got a few things in here called get cart, which takes in an ID, it makes a request to Molten, and then dispatches this action set type. And as you can see, kind of running this same thing for everything that we've got here. We've only got a few sort of functions going on. We've got add to cart, which takes in the product ID and a quantity, that makes a request to Molten, which is a post request. And then it kind of, this is the format that the API expects. This is the URL to create a new item in the cart. It sends along the type, the ID, and the quantity, and then the response for that is the payload. We return that to the reducer, which then updates the state, runs this all of these here, and returns the new state to us. So hopefully that's clear. And it's just a simple way of setting some state and run some filters on the state so we know exactly what's what. And then we've got update quantities. So if we imagine in the context of we have a cart item and we want to update the quantity on that cart item, we can provide a function to our context which can do that. And again, that just makes another request to Molten and set some stuff and returns a response and we update the state. It's pretty much the same when we remove an item from the cart and then we add a promotion. The only different thing here is the type's obviously different that the API is expecting, and we pass along a code. We don't pass anything else. So obviously these are all things that the API at Molten. It's a headless API for e-commerce, and these are all endpoints that we can access. And it's a bit of a pain if we had to kind of create these in functions. It's not really reusable. So with the idea of context, one, we can store that context above everything else. So when people navigate between different pages, that when that updates, that will update in that quantity. You can have like a badge icon at the top of the screen that would just persist, so you know how many items are in the cart. Then all we're doing from this cart provider is it's just a component really. We're just returning a provider and we're passing in the value. And this is what the create context API looks like from React. It expects this value and we're just spreading in pretty much everything we've got. So it's aware of all of the context. We send in the cart ID, we send in whether it's empty, the add to cart function, we add in the update quantity, the remove from cart, and then the add promotion, we add this as well. And then we've been a little bit cheeky here by saying remove promotion is just remove from cart, because this here, the ID is this address, this URI for Molten. It's the same for removing a promotion. So just kind of tricking this to be its own function, but kind of just masking this other function, which is quite cool. And then the children we got, we're kind of just passing that on. So then the children can now look up via the consumer and get access to all of this state. So let's have a look at what that looks like next. And if we head to the pages, I've already created a page here, and this is the cart page. It's just a simple React component that you would typically find for any Gatsby page. But one of the important things up here is we are importing cart context from the context file, and I'll open that so we've got it for reference. we have card context, and then we're importing the use context from React. And then inside of the function here, we are just simply invoking the use context from React, passing in our context, our context, and then we can destructure all of the things that we got from, or that we set in the provider. So it's really cool. So what we're doing here is we're importing this card context, and I've just exported this as the default. We're getting this context, which if you remember is here. And this will kind of memorize and stay with us. And the card context is just equal to this create context. And then we can update the context as we go by using this here. So if we wanted to, we could do add to cart. We could bring down that function. And then we could do some stuff here. So let's give that a try, see what that looks like as well. And then on here, on the page here, I'm just kind of just outputting the items and meta. This items and meta here comes from here. This is the state that will get updated, and then the meta here will also get updated as well. And then this is empty. If this is true, it's going to return the cart as empty. So why don't we give this a try and just see what it looks like. I'm inside of my directory here for the Molten theme. And if you want to contribute to this as well, download the theme, and all you really need to run is yarn install, or just yarn, and then yarn dev. Provide a client ID, and things should just work out of the box. So I've not tried this before I started the stream, so fingers crossed this is working. And then this should, well, what's happening now is it's making a request on Molten to get all of the products, and then it's creating all the different categories, collections, brands. If you watch the video that myself and Jonathan recorded yesterday, you should see a bit more of that in detail and how that works. And so yeah, cool, we're good to go. So let's open up this page here. And this is the default page for the theme right now. There isn't anything that ships to give you a default home page. That's coming soon. So if we navigate to /products, you'll see we get a list of all of our products. And these are static. These are coming from Gatsby itself. These have been created with the source plugin. All those nodes are generated for us automatically, so we don't have to worry about making any dynamic requests. These all just load from Gatsby. And if you're deploying to a CDN like Netlify, those will be shipped and stored there as well. So you're getting them as fast as possible. So let's navigate to the cart page. And then you can see here, we have the output from Molten. And I'm going to just shrink the page down here so we can see what's going on. This is here. So this is everything we see here. And then this, the cart is empty. This is obviously what we see here. So pretty cool. All we've done is import from our context provider, and then following React's convention using use context, this just kind of peeks into the context, and then we can kind of destructure everything that's in the context as well. So nothing too fancy right now. We're not using any consumers or anything at the moment. It's kind of this use context that allows us to just do that for free. Previously, if you've been using React context, you have to use the consumer, and then you can use render props to do structure from that. With use context, we just pass in our context, and React kind of allows us to do that and figures all that stuff out for us. So let's open up the network panel here, and let's just have a look at our requests. And if we go down to the last one here, you'll see that this request was made to Molten, and if we look at the response, we've got nothing in the response here. So the items is an empty array because that's what the default value was. And then if we look at the meta, we've got information about this, such as the tax. We've got an amount, a currency, and a format. There's obviously nothing in the cart, so it doesn't give us any defaults there. Then we get some of the things like when the cart was created. So if I refresh the page again, it's going to make the same request, and if we refresh again, it's creating the same request, and it's keeping that ID because that's stored inside of local storage. So nice. So what we've done now is obviously we have this add to cart. So what do we do with this? Let's try. I've not tried this before the video, but let's just try on click. I'm just going to do this all in line for now. So the ID, this is the ID of the product. So we don't have this right now, but I'm going to go and get that. and I'm just going to say 1. And then add to cart is the button. And then I'm going to switch over and go to Molten. Just going to zoom my screen in for a second so I don't reveal any tokens. I'm just going to grab a product as well. So I'm going to grab this blue desk. And the product ID is just this thing here. And then if I come back and pop that in there, and then I come here, it's updated, the button's on the page. And if I make that request, you will see that it's made a network request. It's posted the data with the ID, quantity, and the type. And that's provided down here in the cart context. And it's made this request here. It's got the response. It's dispatched to the context, the set cart action, passed along the payload, and then it's updated the state. So the state here in the reducer, this part here, it's been updated from there. So then, as you can see on the page now, we're just structuring the items from our context, and here are all of the items. Now you'll see now we get things like what the unit price is for this, and all of the other meta information. We get the amount, the currency, and other bits as well, which is cool. So yeah, if I click add to cart again, if we scroll up, we should see that the quantity here is 1. And then if we click add to cart again, it makes a network request, sends along the same information, but we should see now that the quantity is 2. It's pretty cool. All we've done is kind of created this global provider for the cart. We're storing that context. So in here, I'm refreshing the page here, and there's a bit of a flicker. And all that's going on there is it's having to make that network request. When that network request is successful, it will then update the state on the page for us, and then we've got access to all this information. Now, one of the benefits of using, obviously, the headless CMS is we do some calculations for you. So we can tell you, what's the price of this item? What's the unit price? So this is the unit price for that product. And then what's the value? So the value here is the unit price times the quantity. And then obviously we provide all of that information. And then pretty much everything else to do with the cart, the totals, the formatted amount. Formatted amount is useful as well. So if you're handling multiple currencies, you can make a request to the Molten API in a specific currency. Imagine there's a little toggle, or in the context we stored the currency. You could get the user to switch between the currency, and then we can make a request to Molten and say. So this pretty much wraps up what I wanted to do in this video. There's some things we could do to simplify this, I think. So let's just take a quick look and see what could be simplified. Yes, so yeah, there's a bit of feedback, sorry about that. So what we got in here, we've got a reducer. And this kind of reducer is it's responsible for invoking the new Molten client. But this, you may want to do this kind of higher up the chain. You may want to have multiple providers that talk to Molten, and you may just want to pass down the Molten client as a within the context as well. So let's try and figure out how to do that now. Let's just do that, and if we're successful, all of this should still work, and we should be able to create some new context that talks to our other context and it kind of shares state a little bit. It's quite cool. So yeah, let me just check. Cool. Yep. So that's still on. Okay. Just gonna bring up the category here. Close this down. So that's okay. Cool. So maybe what I want to create is Molten context. And now let's have a look at what we're actually going to be creating. So we need to import, I think, let's move this into here. And let's move create context. So we need to create the context, and then we need to create the Molten instance because we're going to share that. So I think we can move these as well. We don't need those in here. Or do we need? Yes, we'll need that as well. That's fine. So let's just try and refactor this a little bit. So this here, yeah, let's create a molten context. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, I'm just trying to check the stream to see that you can read that. So the molten context will again just follow it just follows the same principle here really. So we're invoking that context or object is kind of, this is where you would put the initial state for that. We're going to let sort of, or use reduce to take care of any other state. And in this case, we're just kind of going to return some value we know. But we don't have kind of an initial value to set with this, so we're just going to leave it blank for now. And what do we have down here? So let's give this a molten context. Sorry, we'll call this molten provider. And what will we destructure? We will destructure the client ID and any children and any props. Pretty simple for now. We don't really need to dive into all that much. So in this case, let's try and move this over here. And same here, we can just return provider, and that's going to send the children along. And then for the provider, we just need to set the value. So let's spread in the props as well. And then let's pass along molten. I think that's all that's required at this point. But I think we'll need to import this cart context and put this inside of here, so we can wrap our Gatsby in the molten provider, and then molten provider kind of handles the context for everything else. So we haven't got to kind of import providers everywhere. We can just kind of do it all in here. So let's just break this out and see what this looks like. I'll call this cart provider. Wrap that in card provider, and that should work. Value props, yeah, don't need any of this. We need to pass the children along, so passing the children along. The children here is this, and then the children that's passed to this from the Gatsby browser. So this is the children at this point, and it gets passed to here, and this all layout provider, doesn't really matter. So yeah, that looks fine. Let me just try and export this. This will not be called cart provider, this will be called molten provider. You can type, and we call this molten consumer. We're not using the consumer right now. We'll call molten context. This molten context is default. We're going to need this in here next. So let's give this a try. Cart ID. So yeah, good old VS Code shows me that I'm not using this. If I put this in here, it is being used, so I need to keep that there. And then this create cart identifier, I'm going to need that as well. So let me just put that across here. I don't need the client, but I can save this file. Saved, so it seems okay. Yeah, let's give this a try. What do we need to import next? We need to import the cart provider and destructure the cart context, maybe, from a cart context. That is the default. Is that right? Cart provider, so it's the other way around. It should work. Cart provider links up here, that passes stuff along. Hopefully that should work. I don't think there's anything more that we need at this point. Just trying to think if there's anything additionally we need. So inside of the inside of the card context, let's just import molten. Is it molten? What are we exporting here? Provider, consumer, context. Yeah, we need the context. So let's call this molten context from molten context. So we just need the context. And then I think we need to use context as well. Yeah, we'll need the use context provider, I think. So just bear with me here. So where we had the provider before, we now need to, I guess, get molten. Get molten from use context and then pass in the molten context. So we're getting molten from molten context, which is just this here, and that's exported to us here as the default, and we're importing the default context. That looks fine. We don't need the client ID, or do we? I don't think I'm using it. Don't think I'm using it at any point, so don't think that's necessary. Just going to do that. That might work. Hopefully that works. Okay, so we've got these here. Card context is not defined. Molten context. Card context. Okay, what's going on? So that would be context, card context. Do we need to pass in the provider anywhere? Just checking out the stream as well. Yeah, what we've got going on. So let's just take a quick look at what's happening here. Okay, cool. Instantiating a new molten client, setting all of that up, and then returning a provider that we can use elsewhere in the app. So let me just have a look at the Gatsby. Oh, am I in the wrong screen? Yeah, I think I am. So the browser here. So we no longer wish to import the cart provider. This will just be the molten provider. And we'll update this to be molten context. And then we'll do the same for the Gatsby SSR as well. I think there's an easier way to do this, but I'm just going to do this right now. Molten context. So that set there, we're sending down the client ID. And voila. Hey, cool, that works. Yeah, we don't actually need the context. We're not using the context, we're just using the provider. We're just kind of wrapping our children with the card provider. It doesn't need to know about the context because the provider takes care of that. And whenever we use this context in the future and we want to get something from it, in this case we don't, we're just using the provider, so it wraps everything else. So yeah, let's just kind of take a recap of what's going on and what we did here. So we have the Gatsby browser file, which imports the molten provider. The molten provider is responsible for initializing a new molten instance from the client SDK. And this just passes it down via the provider and makes it available to us via context. So we pass along this molten instance here. So everything that we can do here. So whenever we make any API calls, this exposes, let me check, so I don't know if I can do this in here. So this exposes like molten.get. If I open up the SDK for that. So yeah, this is the library that we're using. It's very simple. We install it, and then we can do, in our case, we call it Molten, but this is client here. So the client is just the same as what we've got over here. Then we can do client.getProducts, and this products is just the API URL. Well, it's the URL that maps to our API. So you can pass anything you want, and obviously this here we'll just return a promise and kind of doing it here. So that works. That looks to be fine. There's obviously other things like post, put, delete. There's different storage adapters if you wish to use the Windows storage and Node local storage. Node local storage will store it in Node. In our case, we don't really need that. So we're just using the window local storage for now. And if you want to change the fetch, there's a bunch of different options that this takes. And this kind of all maps over to our API. But the thing that we're interested in this video is just how we can kind of keep this instantiated library and share it across all of our pages so the client can make use of it. So if we head to the cart, we're getting that context and the cart context here. We refactored this so it now uses this kind of, it can get the context from Molten, the Molten context, so it can get that client, instantiate client library, but just destructure it here, and then we're able to do molten.get in the same way as we were doing before. We've not had to refactor any of this because we've just followed the same naming and convention here. And then we've got add to cart, update quantity, remove from cart, add promotions. All of this just works still out of the box. So that's cool. So I'm going to quickly try and show you the remove from cart, and this takes in the ID of the cart item, not the product ID. So we'll just need to inspect, well, we won't even need to inspect. So this here is different to the product ID. This is what we need to remove from the cart. So on our cart page, I'm just going to grab remove from cart. Obviously, remove from cart here comes from this here, and it's provided to us by the provider. And that's the context kind of sets all of this. I'll call remove from cart. We'll pass in the ID of the cart item. Save that. Now, this is what's going to get sent to the API. So this whole object is going to get removed. It's not just going to be one. As you see, this is the quantity is 3 here. So this whole line item is going to get removed. It's not just going to remove one from the cart. It's going to remove the entire line item. So if we click remove from cart, you'll see that made a call to the API. It's very fast. It returned that information to us. It updated any of the cart totals, which in our case is 0 now. And then we're able to update the UI in real time. This is using Gatsby. There's nothing static about this. All of our catalog pages that we've seen before, all of these are statically generated. So it doesn't make any API requests for these pages. But in cases where you need to create an external API request, then this is what you need. And I think this is great for a Gatsby theme as well, because this is context and logic that's just abstracted. You do not need to worry about performing all of the things we did in the context provider here. So all of these functions, they're pretty much the same for anyone that's looking to use Molten in the most basics of terms. And then when you invoke these in the components, you could use component shadowing to just update the logic and update the params that go in, the arguments that go into the functions that we call. So hopefully this video has been helpful, just giving you an idea and a quick idea on how you can use some context providers with Gatsby themes. And then, this, I think I want to build on this, and we'll add some more providers and more context for different things on Molten. I think the next thing, if I just check my list of upcoming videos, we have a customer context and we have a checkout context. So the cart context is responsible for knowing what's in the cart. Then we may have a checkout page, which allows people to insert their name, insert any information about them they need to insert in a form. We kind of want to store that in context. So if they go away and they come back, we can kind of just repopulate that form, give it some initial state based on what's in our provider. And we could even store the initial state in local storage. So if someone shuts down the browser and returns to your Gatsby site, and it's using the theme that we're creating here, they kind of could just continue checking out. They've got the checkout, the cart comes along, and then continue checking out. The name and what have you is already populated. It's kind of done and taken care of for us, all in the Gatsby theme. So it's a huge benefit if you're using the Gatsby theme and you install something like this, it can just take care of all of that logic, and you can abstract it, and your theme just becomes a very minimal, a minimal piece of, code. So let's have a look at how all of this works. So if I was to set up a new Gatsby project today, and I used to import the Gatsby theme, I would get all of this for free. I would get this cart page, and I could click add to cart and remove from cart. Obviously, we're going to update this to obviously have a UI and look a bit nicer, and that all of that would be taken care of for us. In the Gatsby config, we're just passing it our client ID, which is all taken care of. Yeah, so that's it for this video. The next video will probably move on to maybe just creating some components for the actual cart items, where we can toggle the quantity, we can remove from cart, we can maybe see the product name a little bit nicer. But yeah, let's just try and create small components and flesh out this theme a little bit more, and then kind of maybe just update some documentation and README on how you could maybe do some component shadowing with the add to cart button. We could even add a drop down for quantity. There's so much we could do. So in the next video, let's actually take a look at creating some of the components required for this cart page. Then we can maybe move on to creating the checkout and the checkout context afterwards as well. So yeah, if you found this video helpful, please let me know. And please subscribe to me on YouTube. Please follow me on Twitter. I'm at NoTrab. That's just Barton backwards if it's difficult. So yeah, if you like this video, please let me know. Please subscribe to me on YouTube. Please give the video a likes if you liked it. If you loved it, then please subscribe. Some videos. I want to try and keep a regular on this and keep those coming. So cool. Peace.